Before you read another word, stop. Just for a second. What if the single habit you're most proud of, your drive, your discipline, your iron grip on your life, is the exact thing destroying your peace, your relationships, and your shot at real success? What if the harder you push, the further you fall behind? What if the smartest move you've ever made isn't one more strategy, one more hustle, one more attempt to control what happens next, but instead the radical, terrifying, life-changing decision to let go? I know. That sounds like something you'd see stitched on a throw pillow at a yoga studio. But stay with me, because what I'm about to share with you has nothing to do with passivity, weakness, or giving up on your ambitions. This is about something far more dangerous and far more powerful. This is about the invisible prison most Americans are living in right now, and the shocking truth is, you built the cage yourself. The invisible prison pictures someone you admire. Maybe it's the entrepreneur who built a company from nothing, the parent who holds the family together, the athlete who woke up at 4 a.m. every single day, the executive who never seems rattled. Now ask yourself, are they actually free? Or are they just controlled in a more sophisticated way? Here's a truth that nobody in the self-help world wants to tell you. Most high achievers in America are not free. They are controlled by their need to win, their fear of failure, their obsession with outcomes, their addiction to approval. They've traded one kind of prison for a better decorated one. Real freedom, emotional freedom, psychological freedom, the kind that lets you sleep deeply, love fully, and move through this world without a constant low-grade hum of anxiety in your chest. That kind of freedom doesn't come from getting more. It doesn't come from doing more. It comes from releasing more. This book is your guide to that release. Across these 15 chapters, you'll discover why your relentless need to control is costing you everything you actually care about. You'll learn the neuroscience and psychology behind why letting go feels like dying, and why that feeling is lying to you. You'll develop practical tools for releasing attachment, dissolving resistance, healing old wounds, and stepping into the version of yourself that doesn't need external circumstances to be a certain way in order to feel whole. By the final page, you'll understand something that the most successful, most at-peace people on this planet know, something they rarely talk about because it sounds too simple to be profound. True power isn't about holding on tighter. It's about learning when and how to open your hands. The question isn't whether you can afford to let go. The question is whether you can afford another decade of not letting go. Let's begin. The grip that's strangling you. Every morning in America, millions of people wake up and immediately start running mental simulations. Will my boss be in a good mood today? Will the traffic cooperate? Will my pitch land the way I rehearsed it? Will my teenager respond to my texts? Will the deal close? Will my body hold up? Will my marriage survive the week? Will I be enough? And underneath all of it, a quiet, desperate engine running 24/7, control, control, control. Here's the brutally honest thing nobody will say at your morning meeting. You are not controlling any of these things. You are performing the ritual of control while the world operates entirely on its own timeline. You are gripping a steering wheel that isn't connected to anything, and burning yourself out in the process. The American dream sold you something seductive, that success belongs to those who master their environment, that the winners are the ones who see everything coming, manage every variable, and never get caught off guard. That discipline means having iron command over your life. But look around. The most anxious people you know are often the most controlling. The most burned-out leaders are the ones who can't let anyone else make a decision. The most miserable couples are those where one or both partners is always trying to manage the other. Control doesn't create peace. Control is the enemy of peace. Real power is internal, not external. It's not about bending the world to your will. It's about governing your own mind so that the world's unpredictability stops being a threat. The person who tries to control everything eventually controls nothing, including themselves. The person who masters their inner state finds that they influence the outer world naturally, almost effortlessly. Think about the last time you were truly stressed. I mean, the kind of stress that sits in your shoulders, disrupts your sleep, makes you sharp with the people you love. Was it because something genuinely dangerous was happening? Or was it because something wasn't going the way you thought it should? That gap between what is and what you believe should be is the address of all psychological suffering. The wider your circle of control, the more of that gap you create. Every person you try to change who won't change, every project you try to micromanage into perfection, every relationship you try to sculpt into your ideal, every future moment you try to guarantee before it arrives, each one of these is another source of suffering you are voluntarily importing into your life. Here's the paradox that will take your breath away once you really feel it. The thing you're afraid to do, letting go, is the very thing that would give you everything you've been struggling to force into existence. Your tight grip isn't protecting your dreams, it's suffocating them. The most effective people in history didn't succeed by controlling more. They succeeded by choosing, very precisely, what not to try to control, and then investing all of that freed-up energy into the small circle of things they could actually influence. Your attention is one of the most valuable currencies on Earth. Right now, most of it is being spent on battles you will never win. Managing other people's emotions, predicting outcomes you can't foresee, trying to guarantee a future that doesn't exist yet. What could you do with that attention if you got it back? That's what this entire book is about. The cage door isn't locked. You've just been too busy rattling the bars to notice. The security myth. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. When was the last time all the controlling you do actually made you feel secure? Not temporarily, not the brief exhale after you sent the email, finished the project, got the text back, closed the deal, but genuinely, deeply, durably secure. The kind of secure where you aren't already mentally scanning for the next potential threat. If you're honest with yourself, that feeling doesn't come, and it never will. Not through external control. Because here's the truth that our hustle culture completely refuses to acknowledge. The more you try to manufacture security from the outside, the more insecure you become. Every layer of control you add creates a new vulnerability. You accumulate money to feel safe, then spend your nights afraid of losing it. You build a relationship and then slowly destroy it with possessiveness because you can't tolerate the idea that this person might leave. You climb the career ladder and then develop a quiet, persistent terror of falling back down. The very strategies you're using to create safety are generating the anxiety you're trying to escape. This is what psychologists call the control paradox. The more you externalize your security, the more you make your peace of mind contingent on circumstances staying a certain way, the more fragile you become. Because circumstances always change. That's not pessimism. That's physics. The economy shifts, relationships evolve, bodies age, companies restructure, projects fail, children grow up and make their own choices. The friend group drifts, the neighborhood changes, nothing holds still. When your sense of okayness depends on external stability, you are building your entire psychological life on sand, and you already know, somewhere deep inside, that the tide is always coming. Here's what no productivity app, no 30-day challenge, and no motivational speaker is going to tell you. Real security is internal. It's not built through control, it's built through a deep, tested, bone-level trust in your own resilience. Think about the people in your life who seem genuinely unshakable, not the people who seem rigid. Those are the most fragile ones, actually. But the people who seem calm even when things go sideways, the ones who can handle unexpected news without crumbling, the ones who lose something significant and somehow find their footing faster than everyone around them. What do those people have? Not better circumstances, not more, control over their environment. They have an internalized belief. Whatever comes, I'll handle it, not because they're tougher or luckier, because they've stopped needing life to be predictable in order to be okay. That's the foundation real security is built on. Not preventing bad things from happening, but knowing without a shred of doubt that you can navigate whatever happens. To develop that, you have to make a trade. You give up the comforting illusion that you can engineer a life without difficulty. In return, you get something genuinely priceless. The freedom to stop scanning for threats every waking moment, because you've stopped believing threats can destroy you. Here's what that trade looks like in practice. Stop spending energy trying to make your life predictable. Start spending it making yourself adaptable. Stop trying to eliminate risk. Start developing the capacity to navigate risk. Stop demanding guarantees. Start trusting your own ability to improvise. This is terrifying at first, especially for high achievers, especially in America, where control is practically a religious value. It means acknowledging that despite your best efforts, things will sometimes break. People will sometimes let you down. Life will sometimes be unfair. But once you stop fighting that reality, a remarkable thing happens. You stop being devastated when it's true. The most unshakable people in history weren't the ones who avoided the storm. They were the ones who learned to find their footing inside it. The backpack of rocks. I want you to try something. Not literally, just in your imagination. Picture yourself wearing a backpack. Now think about every outcome you're attached to right now, the business deal that needs to go a certain way, the relationship that needs to reach a particular milestone, the career path that must follow the specific arc you mapped out, the health goal you've set for yourself, the way your kids need to turn out, the way your partner needs to show up, the way this year needs to go. Every single one of those attachments is a rock. And you've been adding rocks for years. The backpack is so heavy by now that you've forgotten what it feels like to walk without it. You call it caring. You call it ambition. You call it commitment. But what it actually is, what attachment actually is the desperate need for things to be different than they are, for people to act differently than they do, for outcomes to conform to your expectations, regardless of whether those expectations serve anyone. Attachment is not love. Let me say that again, because it's important and most of us have them confused. Attachment is not love. Love is generous. Attachment is possessive. Love creates space. Attachment occupies space. Love says, I want you to be happy. Attachment says, I need you to be happy in a specific way so that I can feel okay. When you're deeply attached to an outcome, your judgment about it becomes useless. You can't see the situation clearly because you're filtering every piece of information through the lens of what you need to see. You make decisions based not on what the situation actually requires, but on what your ego has already committed to wanting. When you're attached to a person behaving a certain way, you stop seeing the actual person in front of you. You see your expectations, your projections, your requirements. You're not in a relationship with them. You're in a relationship with your idea of them. And when you're attached to being right, you stop learning entirely. Your need to defend a position becomes more important than discovering the truth. You become brittle exactly when you need to be flexible. Buddhism identified attachment as the root of suffering 2.5 millennia ago. Modern psychology has done the clinical work to back it up. People who practice non-attachment consistently show lower levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. They make better decisions under pressure. They recover from setbacks faster. They form more satisfying relationships. But here's where almost everyone gets confused. Non-attachment doesn't mean not caring. It doesn't mean becoming indifferent, detached in the coldest sense, or emotionally flat. It means caring without clinging, wanting something while being genuinely okay if it doesn't materialize exactly as you envisioned, being passionate without being desperate. Think of it like holding a bird in your hands. Grip it too tight and you'll crush it. Open your hands completely and it flies away. The art, and this is the whole art, is holding it gently, present, warm, attentive, but not controlling. That's how you're meant to hold your goals, your relationships, your plans, and ultimately, your entire life. When you practice this kind of non-attachment, something almost magical happens. You start making decisions from clarity instead of neediness. You start noticing opportunities that were completely invisible. When you were tunnel-visioned on one specific outcome, you stop repelling what you want with the energy of desperation, because that energy is real, and people feel it, and it pushes things away. Non-attachment gives you the greatest competitive advantage available in an uncertain world, the ability to pivot without panic. While everyone else is still mourning the plan that didn't work, you're already curious about what might work better. While others are fighting reality, you're flowing toward possibility. The rocks in your backpack don't weigh down your body. They weigh down your judgment, your clarity, your creativity, and your joy. One by one, the practice of letting go is the practice of setting them down. Not because you stop caring, but because you finally realize that caring doesn't require crushing. The paradox of surrender. The word surrender makes most Americans want to leave the room. We are a culture built on grit, on the refusal to quit, on outworking the next person. Surrender sounds like the opposite of everything we've been told success requires. It sounds like defeat, like weakness, like the moment you wave the white flag and let life run over you. That's not what I mean. Not even close. True surrender isn't collapsing, it's aligning. It's the recognition that there is an intelligence in the flow of events that is far larger than your individual plan, and that fighting against it is not strength, it's friction. Surrender is the wisdom to stop burning your energy on resistance and start channeling it into what you can actually influence. One of the greatest athletes in American history understood this paradox instinctively. Muhammad Ali said, "Float like a butterfly, sting like a bee." The floating wasn't weakness. The floating was surrender to the rhythm, staying loose, staying responsive, not locking up against what was coming. And because of that surrender, his sting was devastatingly precise. The relaxation made the power possible. The greatest founders and builders understand this too. The ones who build something real don't just bulldoze forward on their original plan. They surrender their attachment to how success arrives while staying fiercely committed to the vision. They pivot when the market teaches them something new. They let go of strategies that aren't working, even if those strategies were their own ideas. That flexibility, that willingness to surrender control over method while holding clarity about direction, is what separates people who build empires from people who spend their lives defending bad decisions. Here is the paradox that will reorganize your entire understanding of power. Surrender gives you more control, not less. When you stop trying to control everything external, You gain complete command of the one thing that actually determines your experience, your response to whatever happens. When you stop demanding that circumstances conform to your expectations, you gain the freedom to work powerfully with circumstances as they are. When you stop fighting reality, you free up all the energy that was tied up in that fight. And suddenly, you have enormous resources available to shape the parts of reality that are genuinely shapeable. What you resist persists. What you fight grows stronger. What you refuse to accept stays in front of you. But what you genuinely surrender to loses its power over you, because you're no longer handing it power through your resistance. Think about a door marked pull that you've been pushing for years. It doesn't open. And every day you push harder, convinced that more force is the answer. Surrender isn't walking away from the door. It's noticing the direction you've been pushing and trying something different. The strongest trees in a storm aren't the rigid ones. They're the ones that bend, completely, sometimes dramatically, and then stand back up after the wind passes. The most effective martial artists don't meet force with force. They redirect it. The most successful entrepreneurs don't bulldoze through every obstacle. They navigate around them. Surrender is not the opposite of action. It is the foundation of effective action. When you surrender the attachment to how something must unfold, you become genuinely available to how it can unfold. When you release your insistence on controlling the story, you become capable of real influence. When you stop needing specific outcomes desperately, you actually become magnetic to outcomes, because you're operating from clarity and confidence rather than from fear and lack. This isn't mysticism, it's practical psychology that works because it aligns you with reality rather than pitting you against it. Breaking the expectation trap. Here's one of the least discussed truths in American psychology. Expectations are premeditated resentments. Every expectation you carry is a demand you've placed on reality without reality's knowledge or consent. And when reality doesn't comply, which it often won't, the disappointment feels like a betrayal, even though reality never agreed to anything in the first place. Your expectations about how your morning should go, how your partner should communicate, how fast your career should advance, how people should treat you when you've worked hard, how much traffic should exist between you and wherever you need to be, how grateful your children should be, how fair your boss should act. Each one of these is a story you've written about how the world should behave. And every time the world ad-libs, instead of following your script, you suffer. The common advice is to have better expectations, more realistic ones, lower ones. But this misses the deeper point entirely. The problem isn't the content of your expectations, it's that you're expecting at all. Expectations are just thoughts about the future that you've promoted to the status of facts. They're your preferences cosplaying as requirements, and when you treat them as hard commitments that the universe owes you, you hand them enormous power over your peace of mind. The most psychologically free people have learned to prefer without expecting. They can want something deeply, work hard for it, care about it, give everything to it, while being genuinely okay if it doesn't arrive on their timeline in their exact desired form. They stay committed to the process without being addicted to specific outcomes. This is not lowering your standards. This is a crucial distinction. A standard is internal, an expectation is external. A standard is about how you choose to show up, regardless of what's happening around you. A standard is within your control. An expectation is a demand about how the world should show up for you. An expectation is almost never within your control. You can hold the standard of doing your most honest, thorough work without expecting that work to be immediately recognized. You can hold the standard of treating every person with dignity without expecting the same in return every time. You can hold the standard of growing and improving without expecting that growth to follow a straight, predictable line. Standards empower you. Expectations disempower you. Standards keep you anchored in your values. Expectations keep you at the mercy of other people's behavior, the market's timing, and life's relentless unpredictability. Most people are walking around imprisoned by expectations they're not even consciously aware they have. They expect their partner to read their mind. They expect their effort to be proportionally rewarded. They expect technology to work. They expect the day to cooperate with their plans. These unconscious expectations create a constant, low-grade state of frustration because reality operates on its own terms, not yours, and it never agreed to the contract you wrote in your head. Bringing those expectations into conscious awareness is the first step to freedom. Not so you can calibrate them more perfectly, but so you can examine them honestly. Is this expectation based in reality? Is it serving me? Is it in anyone's actual control? Most of the time, the answer to all three is no. Every expectation you release is a pound off your back. Every should you let go of creates space for what is, and what is, when you stop fighting it, is almost always more interesting, more instructive, and more full of possibility than anything you would have demanded. Emotional detachment versus emotional numbness. When most people hear emotional detachment, they picture a robot, someone who doesn't feel, doesn't care, moves through life in a kind of sterile, unaffected haze. That's not emotional detachment. That's emotional suppression. And suppression is actually the opposite of what I'm describing. It's still being controlled by emotion, just in a different, more self-destructive direction. True emotional detachment is the highest form of emotional intelligence. Let me explain exactly what I mean. Emotional attachment means your inner state is entirely at the mercy of external events. Someone criticizes your work and you're devastated. A plan falls through and you spiral. Someone ignores your text and you start constructing elaborate interpretations of what it means. You're like a leaf in traffic. Every passing car blows you in a different direction. No stability, no center, no capacity to respond from wisdom because you're too busy reacting from wounds. Emotional detachment, real detachment, means you feel everything fully, but you are not defined by what you feel. You are not the emotion. You are the one experiencing the emotion. There's a profound difference between "I am angry" and "I'm noticing that anger is present right now." One statement makes you the fire. The other makes you the observer of the fire. When you're the observer, the fire can still burn. You can feel its heat, acknowledge its energy, understand what it's telling you, without it burning your house down. This is not suppression. Suppression means pushing the emotion underground, using enormous amounts of energy to keep it from surfacing until it eventually erupts somewhere you don't choose. Detachment means something entirely different. You let the emotion move through you. You feel it completely. You don't grab it and start turning it into a story, a grievance, a permanent condition. Emotions are visitors, not residents. They arise, peak, and dissolve if you let them. Most people don't let them. They catch the anger, replay the incident that triggered it, add more fuel through story and rumination, invite the anger to become a guest who never leaves. What was originally a temporary signal becomes a chronic state. Emotional detachment is the practice of experiencing emotions without feeding them. Notice the anger, acknowledge what it's communicating, often something valuable about your values or your boundaries. Thank it for the information, and then let it move through rather than holding it in place. This practice changes everything about your relationships. When someone says something that normally triggers you, you can feel the trigger without being triggered. You can notice the reaction arising in your body and create a moment of space before you respond. That space, even half a breath worth of space, is where your freedom lives. In that space, you're no longer a biological alarm system running unconscious threat response programs. You are a human being choosing how to respond. This also changes everything about your decisions. Emotionally detached doesn't mean unfeeling. It means you can feel fear without being paralyzed by it. You can feel excitement without being reckless. You can feel love without becoming possessive. You can feel grief without being consumed by it. Here's the simple, practical starting point. Begin noticing the difference between having an emotion and being one. Try this. Instead of, "I'm so anxious about this," say, even just internally, "I'm noticing anxiety right now." Just that shift in language creates distance. It reminds the deeper part of your brain that you are not the anxiety itself. You are something larger, observing the anxiety. From that observer position, you gain something priceless: choice. Not the absence of feeling, but the ability to feel and still act from your wisest self. The goal is not to become emotionally numb. The goal is to become emotionally sovereign, to feel deeply while thinking clearly, to experience fully while remaining grounded, to be completely human, warm, alive, vulnerable, while staying anchored in something within you that no emotion, however intense, can sweep away: the need to be right. There is a war happening in most people's minds, and it's not the one they're aware of. It's not the war between ambition and fear, not between good intentions and bad habits, not between who you are and who you want to become. The most quietly destructive war running in the American psyche right now is the war between being right and being effective. And in most people's lives, in most relationships, most conversations, most meetings, most marriages, being right wins every single time. Even when being right costs them the connection. Even when being right blocks the learning. Even when being right is winning the battle while losing the entire war. Here's why the need to be right is so insidious. It disguises itself as something noble. It presents itself as commitment to truth, to accuracy, to standards. Standing firm feels virtuous. Refusing to back down feels like integrity. But strip away the nobility, and what you usually find underneath is simpler and more uncomfortable: ego. The desperate need to protect your self-image, the discomfort of being wrong, which your nervous system has, somewhere along the way, interpreted as a threat to your value as a person. And so, being right becomes an addiction. Every successful argument is a hit of superiority. Every defended position is a burst of validation. Every admission of error that you didn't make becomes a small, private victory. The cost? Learning stops. When you are more committed to defending your position than discovering the truth, you become systematically closed to new information. You start filtering out data that challenges what you already believe. You surround yourself with people who agree with you and unconsciously dismiss those who might stretch your thinking. Psychologists call this confirmation bias, the tendency to seek evidence that confirms existing beliefs while ignoring contradictory data. You're no longer thinking, you're just building a case for conclusions you already reached. The need to be right also quietly dismantles your closest relationships. Think about the last real argument you had with someone you love. How much of that argument was genuinely about solving the problem? How much was about proving your version of events was the correct one? When you're invested in being right, you can't truly listen. You're too busy composing your rebuttal to actually hear what's being said. You turn conversations into competitions. You make the relationship into a courtroom where someone has to lose for you to win. And here's the cruelest irony. You can have every fact on your side and still be catastrophically wrong about what the moment requires. You can win the argument and lose the marriage. You can prove your point and completely miss the point. The most effective people in any field have learned to hold their opinions the way a good scientist holds a hypothesis. With rigor and investment, yes, but with ultimate loyalty to the evidence rather than to their prior conclusions. Steve Jobs was famous for this. He'd argue a position with his full, formidable conviction, and then, when someone showed him a genuinely better idea, he'd reverse completely. He wasn't inconsistent. He was more committed to the best answer than to the answer he'd started with. That's not weakness. That's rare, disciplined intellectual courage. The difference is this: strong opinions, loosely held, versus weak opinions, tightly gripped. People who cling hardest to their opinions are often the least certain about their own worth. People who hold opinions lightly have built their identity on something deeper and more durable than being correct about any particular thing. Releasing the need to be right doesn't mean becoming spineless or abandoning your convictions. It means becoming more committed to truth than to your current understanding of truth. It means being more interested in what works than in what you've always done. It means being willing to be wrong about small things so you can be right about the ones that actually matter. Try this. The next time you feel yourself hardening in an argument, ask one question before you speak. Am I trying to win, or am I trying to understand? That single question can dissolve more conflict, save more relationships, and accelerate more growth than almost anything else you'll encounter in this book. The freedom of non-resistance. Most psychological suffering doesn't come from pain. It comes from resistance to pain. Pain is part of the human deal. Difficulty, loss, disappointment, setbacks. These are not design flaws. They are features of a life fully lived. But resistance? The mental war against what's happening? The constant internal argument with reality? That is entirely optional, and it is costing you enormous amounts of energy that you cannot afford to keep spending. Here is the thing about resistance that most people never realize. It feels productive. It feels like doing something about your problems. It feels like you're standing up for yourself, protecting your values, refusing to be a pushover. So you keep doing it day after day, convinced that the suffering your resistance generates is the price of caring deeply. It isn't. Resistance is not action. Resistance is paralysis wearing the costume of righteous indignation. Think about the last time you were stuck in terrible traffic. The traffic was real. Your annoyance? Optional. Your internal monologue about how the universe was conspiring against your schedule? Optional. Your blood pressure rising as though the cars in front of you were personally disrespecting you? Entirely optional. The traffic existed with or without your resistance to it. Your resistance didn't clear a single lane. It didn't shorten your commute by a single minute. All it did was take a neutral inconvenience and transform it into a genuine source of suffering, which you then carried into your home, your conversations, your evening. This is the pattern. Your job has frustrating aspects. Your relationships have challenging dynamics. Your body has limitations on certain days. Your finances have real constraints. These are facts, data points, current reality. Resistance doesn't change any of these facts. It just makes experiencing them significantly more painful. Non-resistance is not resignation. I want to be very clear about this because it's the most common misunderstanding. Non-resistance doesn't mean accepting everything passively and never trying to improve your situation. It means stopping the internal war against what is, so you can see clearly what can be done about it. When you stop fighting the fact of your situation, you free up the mental and emotional resources that were tied up in that fight. Suddenly, you can think more clearly. You can see options you couldn't see when you were clouded by reactivity. You can take decisive action rather than spinning in circles of complaint. Non-resistance means accepting current reality as the starting point for creating a different reality, not as the final destination you're obligated to love. The practice begins with noticing when you're in resistance mode. You'll recognize it by the mental commentary. This shouldn't be happening. This isn't fair. Why me? This is wrong. These thoughts are diagnostic signals. They tell you that you're fighting the present moment instead of working with it. When you catch them, try this. Instead of trying to immediately silence the resistance, just observe it. Say to yourself, I notice I'm resisting what's happening right now. No judgment, no pressure, just witnessing. Then try 2 words that have more psychological power than most people realize. What is? Not as a philosophical statement, as a practical acknowledgement. The traffic is what is. The difficult colleague is what is. The diagnosis is what is. The financial setback is what is. From that acknowledgement, which costs nothing, you can ask better questions. Not why is this happening to me, but what can I learn here? Not this is terrible, but what's the best response I can give right now? The deepest form of non-resistance is accepting, at a cellular level, that life includes difficulty, that uncertainty, impermanence, and loss are not malfunctions but features of existence. When you truly absorb that reality instead of fighting it, you stop being surprised by hard things. You stop wasting energy arguing with the terms of being human. And then, paradoxically, you become more capable, not less, because all the energy that was draining into resistance is suddenly available for response. You can't control what happens to you, but you can dissolve your resistance to it. And in that dissolution you find not defeat, but a quiet, extraordinary kind of power. Mastering the state of flow. There are moments you've had, you know exactly the ones I mean, where everything clicked. Maybe it was in the middle of a presentation that suddenly stopped being a performance and became a conversation. Maybe it was during a run when your body found a rhythm and time seemed to bend. Maybe it was writing or coding or cooking or building something with your hands, when the gap between thinking and doing disappeared and you were just doing. Athletes call it the zone. Psychologists call it flow. Whatever the name, you know it when you're in it, and you also know that it's rare and that you've never quite figured out how to find it on purpose. Here's what nobody taught you. Flow is not a gift. It's not luck or talent. It's your default state, what emerges naturally when you stop interfering with yourself. The biggest single obstacle to flow is the presence of a self-conscious observer, the part of your mind that is constantly monitoring, evaluating, and narrating your performance while you're performing. This internal commentator creates a split. The doer and the watcher of the doer. That split generates friction, tension, and the mental noise that crowds out everything else. When you're in flow, that split disappears. There is no watcher. There is only doing. You are not thinking about how you're performing. You are performing. You are not worried about the outcome. You are completely absorbed in the process. 3 conditions make flow reliably possible. First, matched challenge. The task needs to be just slightly beyond your current comfort zone, hard enough to require your full attention, manageable enough not to overwhelm you. Too easy, and your mind drifts. Too hard, and anxiety takes over. The sweet spot between boredom and panic is where flow lives. Second, clear goals and immediate feedback. You need to know what you're working toward and have some way of telling, moment by moment, whether you're on course. This doesn't have to be external feedback. It can be internal, the feel of the words on the page, the response in the room, the sensation in your body as you move. Third, undivided attention. Flow is impossible when your attention is fractured. This means eliminating external distractions and, more importantly, eliminating internal ones. The emails, the notifications, the background hum of unresolved worry. To find flow, you have to bring yourself fully to where you are. But here's the deeper practice, and this is where it connects to everything else in this book. Flow isn't just about the right conditions. It's about learning to let go during the activity, letting go of the need to look good, letting go of attachment to how it turns out, letting go of the self-consciousness that's constantly measuring your performance against some imagined standard, letting go of the outcome long enough to be completely present for the process. Flow is, at its core, a state of non-attachment in motion. When you release the need for a specific result, you become fully available to the moment you're actually in. When you stop judging what's emerging and start staying curious about it, the creative or performance intelligence that lives in you below the level of conscious thought gets to do its work uninterrupted. This state is available to you in a meeting, in a kitchen, in a difficult conversation, in a gym, on a highway, anywhere. When you choose presence over performance, flow also requires making peace with mistakes. The moment you become afraid of getting something wrong, you hold back, you hesitate, you second-guess mid-motion. And that hesitation is exactly the self-interference that blocks the state you're trying to reach. Mistakes in flow aren't failures, they're information, data, course corrections in real time. When you accept them as part of the process, rather than evidence of your inadequacy, you stop flinching at them, and flow becomes sustainable rather than fragile. The life lived in flow is not effortless, it's deeply engaged, but there is a quality of ease in it, a sense that you are moving with something rather than against it. That is the fundamental difference between a life of grinding resistance and a life of genuine power. You were designed for flow. Your mind and body are optimized for it. The only thing standing between you and regular access to this state is the accumulated habit of self-interference. Let go of the need to monitor yourself so relentlessly. Give the doer the space to do. You might be astonished by what it produces. Present moment as home base. The present moment is the only location where your life actually occurs. Read that again. Not because it's complicated, but because most of us live as though it weren't true. Right now, in this moment, the majority of people who read these words have a significant portion of their attention somewhere else. Either they're running yesterday's conversation on loop, analyzing a mistake, replaying a moment they wish had gone differently, or they're projecting forward, rehearsing tomorrow's meeting, simulating a potential argument, calculating worst-case scenarios that may never materialize. Meanwhile, the only moment that contains anything real, the only moment where action is possible, where connection exists, where life is actually happening, slips by essentially unnoticed. This isn't a small problem. This is the central source of most psychological suffering. When you're mentally in the past, you're often dealing with regret, resentment, or a kind of grief for versions of things that can't be changed. When you're mentally in the future, you're usually dealing with anxiety, worry, or the low-grade dread of trying to control what hasn't happened yet. Either way, you're suffering over things that aren't actually occurring right now. Here's something remarkable. The present moment, stripped of all your mental commentary about it, is almost always okay. Right now, as you read this, you're probably not in genuine danger. You have air. You have enough stability to be reading a book. The immediate present, experienced directly, is usually neutral or even quietly pleasant. It's the stories layered on top of it that create the suffering. Present moment awareness is the practice of experiencing life directly, not through the filter of constant mental narration, not the absence of thought, but a different relationship to thought. Instead of being swept away by every current of mental activity, you become the bank of the river. You're aware of what's flowing, but you're not the flow. This practice begins with noticing when you've left. Most people are so habitually displaced into the past or future that they genuinely don't realize they've been gone. They're on autopilot, physically present, mentally somewhere else entirely. The first skill is simply developing the awareness of when this has happened. Not so you can judge yourself for it, but so you can return. One of the most reliable ways to return is through the body. Physical sensation is always happening now. The feeling of your feet on the floor, the temperature of the air against your skin, the rise and fall of your chest as you breathe. These sensations are immediate, present, tense anchors that the mind cannot time travel away from when you bring genuine attention to them. Your senses are gateways to now. What are you actually seeing? Not what you think about what you're seeing, but the raw visual experience. What sounds are present without you labeling them? What does the room smell like? When you come fully into the present through these sensory doors, something interesting happens to the story of your problems. Many of them simply aren't here. They live in the past or future. In this exact moment, right now, most people's actual present is manageable. It's the accumulated weight of all the other moments, the ones you're carrying from before, the ones you're dreading ahead, that makes life feel crushing. Present moment awareness is also what makes you genuinely effective. You can only act now. You can only decide now. You can only connect with another human being now. All the mental time travel is just mental activity. It doesn't constitute action, and it often impedes it. The person who shows up fully present in a conversation is extraordinary, not because they have more answers, but because their full attention is one of the rarest gifts available in human interaction. Most people are mentally composing their response while you're still speaking. A person who is actually here, actually listening, actually seeing you, you feel it immediately. It changes everything. Here's the practice distilled to its essence. Notice when you've left the present. Don't judge yourself. Just notice. Find one physical anchor, breath, feet on ground, the feeling of your hands. Return. Repeat indefinitely for the rest of your life. It sounds simple because it is simple. Simple doesn't mean easy. But the simplicity is actually good news. It means you don't need special equipment, special circumstances, or any particular amount of free time. You can practice this in traffic, in a meeting, in the middle of an argument, in the grocery store checkout line. Every moment you spend fully present is a moment of genuine freedom. And when you string enough of them together, you discover that the peace you've been searching everywhere for has been here, available, all along, in the only place it could ever actually be. Relationships without chains. Every relationship you have is a mirror of your inner attachment patterns, not partially, completely. The neediness you feel in relationships, the control you try to exert, the jealousy, the resentment, the loneliness even inside connection. None of these come primarily from the other person. They come from the relationship between you and your own unmet needs, unexamined expectations, and the deep, often unconscious belief that someone else's behavior is responsible for your inner state. Most people enter relationships, romantic, familial, professional, carrying an invisible contract. They never show it to the other person, often because they aren't fully aware of it themselves. But it reads something like this: if you behave in the specific ways I need you to, I will feel okay. And if you don't, I will be hurt, angry, or withdrawn. This contract is the engine of almost every relationship conflict that has ever existed, because the other person, being a full human being with their own needs, their own story, their own wildly unpredictable inner life, will inevitably fail to execute your contract. Not because they don't care, simply because they are not your contract. They are themselves. When you relate to people through the lens of what you need from them, you can never actually see them. You see your requirements, your projections, your conditional acceptance. You love them not as they are, but as you need them to be. And people, even the ones who love you deeply, can feel the difference between being seen and being managed. Practicing detachment in relationships doesn't mean caring less. It means caring differently. It means loving someone for who they are rather than for what they provide or how they make you feel. It means being genuinely interested in their actual inner life rather than trying to steer it. It means wanting them to grow even when that growth takes them in directions you didn't anticipate or prefer. Detached love is not cold love. It's the most generous form of love available because it has no hidden invoice. Here are the specific attachments that do the most damage in relationships: the need to win arguments. Most relationship conflicts aren't really about the surface issue. They're about the need to be seen, understood, and validated. When you shift from trying to win to trying to genuinely understand the other person's perspective, conflicts stop being battles and become something more interesting. Windows into how the person you love actually works, the need to fix or save. Many people are drawn to relationships where they can play the role of rescuer or problem solver. This feels like love, but it often contains a subtle implication. I know better than you about your own life. True respect means trusting people to navigate their own struggles, make their own mistakes, and find their own footing. The need for constant reassurance. When your sense of worth depends on regular external confirmation that you're loved and valued, you become exhausting to be around. Not because you're wrong to want connection, but because you're trying to solve an internal problem with an external solution. The reassurance never sticks. Tomorrow, you'll need it again. The need to control how the relationship unfolds. Relationships have their own organic development. Trying to accelerate or direct that process, forcing milestones, demanding declarations, engineering intimacy, almost always backfires, creating pressure that pushes the natural thing away. Detached love requires what might be the most difficult thing in human experience: being so grounded in your own worth that you genuinely don't need the other person to complete you, not because you don't want them, but because you don't need them in order to be whole. When you reach that place, the relationship transforms. You stop working so hard to keep it and start simply being in it. You stop being afraid of losing the person and start appreciating the time you have with them. You stop trying to control the narrative and start being curious about where it naturally leads, and the love that persists when you're not gripping, not managing, not performing. That love is the real thing. Wounds from yesterday, fears of tomorrow. Your past is a story, not in the sense that it didn't happen. It happened, but the version of it that lives in your mind is a construction. It's been filtered through your mood on the day you remember. It, colored by the beliefs you hold about yourself, shaped and reshaped every time you've retold it. Memories are not recordings. They're living documents that you're still editing. And your future is a story, too, an entirely fictional one. A projection assembled from your past experiences, your current fears, and your best or worst guesses about what comes next. Both stories live exclusively in your mind, yet they have more power over your present experience than what's actually happening right now. This is the tragedy. Most people are living inside their stories about what happened and what might happen, rather than in the only place where genuine life occurs, the present. Most people carry their past wounds the way you'd carry a treasured possession. They've told the story of how they were hurt, betrayed, abandoned, overlooked, failed, so many times that the story has become load-bearing architecture in their identity. They know exactly who wronged them, when, why, and how it still affects them today. The story is polished, it's detailed, it makes sense of everything. But here's the uncomfortable truth underneath that story. Holding on to past wounds doesn't protect you from future hurt. It guarantees present suffering. Every hour spent reliving a trauma is an hour not spent engaging with current possibility. Every ounce of emotional energy given to old resentments is energy unavailable for new experiences. The wound itself may have happened years ago, but the suffering is happening right now because you are choosing, often unconsciously, to keep it active. This is not a judgment. It is not blame. It is actually compassion, framed honestly. The past has already happened. You cannot change it, but you are the one choosing, moment by moment, whether to bring its emotional charge into the present or to let it rest where it belongs, in a time that has already ended. True healing is not forgetting. It's the capacity to remember without being hijacked, to acknowledge that something painful happened without being emotionally retransported to that moment as though it were occurring now. Forgiveness is one of the most misunderstood concepts in American culture. People think it means condoning what was done, excusing the other person, or pretending the harm didn't matter. It means none of those things. Forgiveness is a selfish act. You don't forgive for their sake. You forgive for yours. You release the resentment not because the person deserves it, but because the resentment is yours to carry. And it's heavy, and it has been heavy for long enough. Every moment your energy is directed toward keeping anger toward someone alive is a moment that person still has power over your inner life. Forgiveness is the decision to take that power back. Now, the fears of tomorrow. Most anxiety is not about present danger. It is about imagined future danger. Scenarios that exist only in the architecture of your worry, built from worst-case assumptions and a nervous system that cannot distinguish between a real threat and a vividly imagined one. The mind creates future fears as a kind of catastrophic planning mechanism. It believes that if it worries hard enough about potential problems, it will somehow be better prepared to handle them. But this is almost never how it actually works. Worry doesn't prepare you. Worry depletes you. It drains the mental and emotional resources that genuine preparation and effective response actually require. There is a useful distinction here: preparation versus worry. Preparation is concrete. It involves specific actions based on realistic assessments of likely challenges. You build the emergency fund, you have the difficult conversation early, you create the contingency plan. Worry is the absence of concrete action combined with the presence of repeated imaginary suffering. It is ruminating on scenarios you can't control, suffering over outcomes that haven't occurred and may never occur, burning your present energy on fires that aren't real yet. Releasing future fears is not naive. It does not mean abandoning prudence or planning. It means making the clear-eyed distinction between what is genuinely worth addressing now and what is simply your imagination tormenting you, and then coming back again and again to the only place where you actually have any power, right here, right now, in the life that is actually unfolding. The liberation of non-identification. Let me ask you the most important question in this book. Who are you? Not what do you do, not what have you achieved or suffered, not what roles you occupy or what other people think of you. Not what you own or what you've built, not the collection of thoughts currently running through your mind. Who are you? Most people have never sat with that question long enough to feel genuinely uncertain about the answer. They answer quickly and automatically. I'm a mother, a founder, a veteran, a survivor, a New Yorker, a Christian, a progressive, an anxious person, a successful person, a person who's been through a lot. All of those things may be true, but they are all things you have. Roles, experiences, beliefs, circumstances, they are not what you are. And here's why this matters more than almost anything else in this book. When you identify with what you have, your roles, your history, your emotions, your opinions, you become fragile. Because all of those things can be lost, challenged, or contradicted. The role can end, the history can be reframed, the emotion can shift, the opinion can be proven wrong. And if your identity is made of those things, every threat to them feels like a threat to your existence. This is why some people fall apart when they retire, or when a relationship ends, or when their status changes. This is why criticism feels like an attack on who you are, rather than a comment on something you did. This is why people defend their beliefs with the ferocity of someone defending their life, because they've fused their beliefs with their identity. The ego, not Freud's id-ego superego, but the psychological and philosophical sense of a false self constructed from mental concepts, is always under siege, because it's built on thoughts and memories that can be challenged at any moment, so it needs to be right, to be special, to be in control, to be permanent. These needs generate most of the striving, defending, and suffering in human life. Underneath all of that constructed identity is something different, something that was present before you had a name for yourself, something that doesn't change when circumstances change, something that has been witnessing every experience you've ever had without itself being any of those experiences. In various traditions, this is called the witness, the observer, pure awareness, consciousness itself. You are not your thoughts. You are the awareness that notices thoughts arising. You are not your emotions. You are the space in which emotions appear and dissolve. You are not your roles. You are the one playing the roles. When you begin to recognize yourself as the observer rather than the observed, something shifts at a deep level. You become genuinely unshakable, not because nothing affects you, but because you have identified with something that cannot be threatened. Awareness itself cannot be insulted. Consciousness itself cannot be diminished. The deeper self cannot fail, cannot age, cannot be rejected. This recognition doesn't disconnect you from life. If anything, it allows you to engage with life more fully, because you're no longer using so much of your energy defending a fragile, constructed identity. When strong emotions arise, try this. Instead of "I am afraid," say "fear is present." Instead of "I am a failure," say "a feeling of having failed is arising." This subtle linguistic shift creates the distance between you and the experience that allows you to navigate it rather than drown in it. Non-identification doesn't happen once and then stay permanent. The mind's habit of identification is deeply ingrained. You'll get caught up in thoughts, emotions, and roles repeatedly for the rest of your life, probably. That's fine. That's being human. But each time you notice what's happening and return to the wider, quieter awareness that you actually are, each time you step back from the drama and recognize the one who's watching the drama, you strengthen something fundamental. The person who knows themselves as something deeper than their circumstances, their emotions, their achievements, and their failures is not untouched by life. They are available to life, fully, freely, without needing it to be anything other than exactly what it is. Creating from emptiness, the greatest art, the most important breakthroughs, The ideas that genuinely change things, they almost never come from someone who already knew what they were going to produce. They come from someone who got quiet enough to hear what wanted to be produced. This is the secret that professional creators rarely discuss openly because it sounds almost mystical, but it's not. It's practical. It's about understanding the conditions under which genuine creativity, the kind that surprises even the person who made it, actually becomes possible. Most people approach creative work and problem solving from what I'd call fullness of plans, intentions, strategies, and prior assumptions. They arrive at the blank page, the empty whiteboard, the unanswered question already loaded with ideas about what the answer should look like. They're not really exploring, they're confirming. Real creativity requires something different. It requires emptiness, not the emptiness of having nothing, but the emptiness of being genuinely open, uncluttered by what you think you already know, undefended about what direction things might go, available to what wants to emerge rather than what you've already decided to make. This is why artists talk about their best work coming through them rather than from them. Why scientists describe their greatest insights arriving not during the 15-hour analysis session, but in the shower the next morning. Why the best solutions to complex organizational problems often emerge not from the loudest person in the room, but from the one who says, "Wait, what if we approached this completely differently?" The fundamental obstacle to this kind of creativity is premature evaluation. You start writing a sentence and immediately decide it's not good enough. You sketch a first idea and instantly compare it unfavorably to what you think the final version should look like. You propose something tentative in a meeting and abandon it before it's fully formed because someone's facial expression suggests skepticism. This kills creativity in its infancy. Every time. Creating from emptiness means suspending that internal critic long enough to let something actually emerge. It means curiosity before judgment. It means welcoming what appears before measuring it against a standard. It means trusting the process more than your preconceptions about where it should lead. This requires a specific kind of courage, the courage to not know, the courage to sit in the open space without filling it immediately with familiar patterns and safe choices. The courage to follow an impulse without demanding in advance that it justify itself. In business, this is the capacity for genuine innovation rather than iteration. The company that keeps optimizing what it already does is not the same as the company that becomes genuinely empty of its prior assumptions long enough to imagine something truly different. In relationships, this is the capacity to have a conversation without already knowing how it ends, which is the only way a conversation can actually take you somewhere new. In life, this is the capacity to let the next chapter be something you couldn't have written in advance, which is the only way the next chapter can surprise and transform you. Creating from emptiness also means releasing ownership of what emerges. When you see yourself not as the origin of an idea, but as a channel through which it arrived, the work itself often improves, because you're serving the work rather than using it to prove something about yourself. What comes through you when your ego gets out of the way is often better, stranger, and more resonant than anything your planning mind would have produced. This is accessible to you, not just in art, in how you parent, how you lead, how you solve problems, how you love. The fertile emptiness is not a special state reserved for geniuses. It's what emerges when you get quiet enough, open enough, and trust enough to stop filling every space with the known. Living unchained. We've come a long way together in these pages. We've looked honestly at the grip you've been keeping on your life, and the cost of that grip. We've examined the security you've been trying to manufacture from the outside and why it always feels like it's slipping away. We've gone through the heavy backpack of attachments, the paradox of surrender, the prison of expectations, the difference between emotional sovereignty and emotional numbness, the addiction of being right, the quiet devastation of resistance, and the extraordinary states available when you finally, genuinely let go. Now, I want to talk about what life actually looks like when all of this becomes not a set of ideas but a practice, a way of moving through the world. Complete freedom is not the ability to do whatever you want without consequence. That's not freedom. That's the illusion of freedom, which usually leads to its own sophisticated forms of bondage. Real freedom is something quieter and more radical. Liberation from the internal forces that compel you to act against your own deepest wisdom. The person living unchained is not someone who has achieved perfect circumstances. They are someone who has, through practice, and often through significant struggle, stopped needing circumstances to be perfect in order to be at peace. They've stopped waiting. Most people are living in a conditional future. When I get the promotion, I'll be happy. When the relationship is stable, I'll be at peace. When the finances are sorted, I'll finally relax. When the kids are grown, when the business takes off, when I lose the weight, when the world calms down, then, finally, I'll allow myself to feel okay. But that future never arrives, because the conditions never align perfectly. And even when they temporarily approach something close to your requirements, the goalpost moves, because the desire to control never actually gets satisfied. It only finds new things to need. The unchained person has recognized this game and stepped out of it. They've located their okayness inside, in who they actually are, in this moment, rather than in external circumstances that may or may not cooperate. This doesn't make them passive. It makes them liberated to act. When you're not acting from desperation, your actions are cleaner, more effective, less costly to yourself and others. You can pursue ambitious goals without your self-worth riding on every outcome. You can take bold risks without being destroyed when some of them don't pay off. You can engage deeply with people without needing them to behave in specific ways to keep you okay. This is what genuine empowerment looks like, not the bumper sticker version, the real thing. A few final practices for the unchained life. Release the need to explain yourself. You don't owe the world a running commentary on your choices. The people who require constant justification from you are asking you to make their comfort more important than your sovereignty. You can be kind without being accountable to every opinion of you. Make peace with impermanence. Everything you have will change or end. Every relationship, every season of success, every body, every version of yourself. Fighting this is the most exhausting battle in existence. Accepting it, not as tragedy, but as the nature of things, is one of the most liberating recognitions available to a human being. The impermanence doesn't make things less precious, it makes them more precious. The sunset is beautiful because it ends. Choose presence over performance. Most of us spend enormous energy managing how we appear to others. What would happen if you invested that energy in simply being, fully, honestly, without the performance? You might lose some approval. You would almost certainly gain something more valuable. The experience of being genuinely yourself, in genuine contact with actual life, not a managed version of it. Trust your own resilience. Every difficult thing you've ever been through, you got through. You have a 100% survival rate for your hardest days. The next hard thing will be hard, and you will navigate it too. Not because of your plans, not because you controlled the outcome, but because of something more fundamental and more durable than either of those. The complete freedom you're looking for is not in a future version of your life. It is not waiting for you on the other side of the right achievement, the right relationship, or the right amount of security. It's here, right now, in this moment. Not because everything is fine, sometimes everything is not fine, but because you are, underneath the noise, underneath the story, underneath the accumulated weight of everything you've been carrying, fundamentally, irreducibly okay. The chains were never locked. They were held in place by a habit of mind that told you they were necessary. You can set them down now. The door is open, the path is clear, and the life waiting for you on the other side of letting go is more alive, more meaningful, and more genuinely yours than anything you could have planned. This is the power of letting go, not weakness, not giving up, not passivity. The most profound form of courage available to you, opening your hands and trusting what remains.